Let me start with a scenario. Imagine you're an airplane pilot. Maybe you're a private pilot, maybe you're a commercial pilot. Maybe you've been flying airplanes for decades, but you also fly powered parachutes. Your flight review is coming due, so you schedule a flight review with a powered parachute instructor. You complete the ground training, you complete the flight training, you get the endorsement in your logbook. You go home thinking you're good for another 24 months. Simple, right? Maybe not. According to recent FAA guidance, there may be a trap hiding in that scenario. And if you fly both powered parachutes and airplanes, it's something you should understand. Today, we're going to talk about what the FAA said, why instructors are discussing it, and why the biggest impact may be on powered parachute pilots who are also rated as private pilots. Even more surprising, there is a powered parachute paradox that affects those with private pilot powered parachute ratings. We will talk about that too. Here's how most pilots think about flight reviews. For years, most pilots have understood flight reviews in a pretty straightforward way. Complete a flight review, receive the endorsement, remain current. In fact, many pilots have understood that a flight review conducted in any aircraft for which they're rated satisfies the flight review requirement. So, if you hold an airplane rating and a powered parachute rating, a flight review in either aircraft would generally satisfy the flight review requirement. That's how many of us have thought about it. But a recent FAA interpretation introduced an important distinction. Not about the aircraft, about the instructor. Here's what the FAA is saying. The FAA recently issued guidance discussing flight reviews conducted by sport pilot flight instructors. The takeaway is this. The FAA says that a flight review conducted under Sport Pilot Flight Instructor Authority supports the exercise of sport pilot privileges. Now, at first glance, that doesn't sound particularly controversial. But let's walk through a real-world example. Here's where the trap appears. Let's say you hold private pilot single-engine land, private pilot powered parachute. You need a flight review, so you visit a powered parachute flight instructor. You complete your flight review with a sport pilot flight instructor for powered parachutes. You receive the endorsement. You leave believing your flight review requirement has been satisfied for all of your pilot privileges. That's where the trap may exist. The FAA's recent guidance suggests that while the flight review is valid, the privileges supported by that flight review may be limited to sport pilot privileges. And that's a distinction many pilots have never considered. Here's why airplane pilots should pay attention. If you're a powered parachute pilot, the practical impact may be smaller than you think, especially after MOSAIC. For years, one of the major differences between sport pilot privileges and private pilot privileges involved the night operations. But MOSAIC changed that for powered parachutes. Sport pilots can now exercise privileges that previously required a private pilot certificate, provided they received the required training and endorsements. Sport pilots could already operate in controlled airspace with the appropriate training and endorsements. So for many powered parachute pilots, the gap between sport pilot privileges and the privileges they actually use may be smaller than ever before. But airplane pilots are a different story. For an airplane pilot, limiting operations to sport pilot privileges can have much greater consequences. That's why I believe the biggest practical impact may fall on pilots who fly both airplanes and powered parachutes. Now here's the powered parachute paradox. Let's think this through. A qualified sport pilot flight instructor for powered parachutes can train a student for a private pilot powered parachute certificate. That instructor can provide the required endorsements. That instructor can prepare the applicant for the practical test. That instructor can sign the applicant off for the practical test. And that student can go earn a private pilot certificate. But according to the FAA's recent guidance, that same instructor may be providing a flight review that only supports sport pilot privileges. Now, before anyone gets upset, I'm not saying the FAA is wrong. I'm simply pointing out why many instructors are asking questions. From a pilot's perspective, it feels unusual. The instructor is qualified to help create the private pilot, but the flight review may not support all of the privileges associated with that certificate. That's the paradox. Here's what I'm not saying. I want to be very careful here. I'm not saying flight reviews are invalid. I'm not saying pilots should panic. I'm not saying anyone has been doing something wrong. And I'm certainly not offering legal advice. What I am saying is that the FAA has introduced a distinction that many pilots had never previously considered. And when experienced instructors start asking questions about a new interpretation, That's usually worth paying attention to. Here's my take. Personally, I think there are two lessons here. First, if you're a powered parachute pilot, you should understand the authority under which your instructor is operating. Second, if you also hold airplane ratings, you should be especially careful about assuming that a flight review conducted in a powered parachute automatically supports all of the privileges you intend to exercise in airplanes. That's the potential trap. Not that the flight review didn't happen, not that the endorsement isn't real, but that the privilege supported by that endorsement may not be what you assume they were. Here's my conclusion. The FAA's recent guidance has created a lot of discussion, and frankly, I think that's healthy. Good pilots ask questions, good instructors ask questions, and sometimes those questions reveal distinctions that many of us never noticed before. For powered parachute pilots, MOSAIC has narrowed the practical gap between sport pilot privileges and private pilot privileges. But for pilots who also fly airplanes, the consequences may be much more significant. That's why I believe this issue deserves attention. What do you think? Is this a meaningful operational concern, or is it simply a paperwork distinction for most powered parachute pilots? Let me know in the comments. I'd especially like to hear from instructors, examiners, and pilots who hold both airplane and powered parachute ratings. Thanks so much for watching, and blue skies.